welcome to the Bare Metal Cyber CISM Prepcast. This series helps you prepare for the exam with focused explanations and practical context. Compliance plays a foundational role in modern information security management. It ensures that security practices align not only with internal goals but also with external expectations set by governments, regulators, and industry standards. For security leaders, maintaining compliance is not optional. It is a core part of their responsibility to protect the organization from legal and financial consequences. A robust compliance posture demonstrates that the organization is conducting itself ethically, transparently, and within the boundaries of applicable laws. At the same time, compliance reinforces accountability by requiring that individuals, departments, and vendors adhere to specific standards and can be held responsible for their actions. Without proper attention to compliance, organizations face significant risks. These may include fines, sanctions, litigation, and reputational damage that can take years to repair. Compliance creates a baseline of required behavior and acts as a framework for consistent, repeatable controls. When integrated correctly into security management, it can also become a powerful driver for cultural change, program maturity, and stakeholder confidence. For CISM candidates, understanding how compliance shapes policy, controls, and reporting structures is essential to managing security at a strategic level. Legal and regulatory requirements come in several distinct forms. Statutory laws are mandatory rules enacted by governments. These include broad data protection laws like the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe or national privacy acts in countries such as Canada or Brazil. Regulatory requirements are more specific and are issued by oversight bodies such as financial commissions, data protection authorities, or health agencies. These typically include detailed controls and reporting obligations that organizations must follow. Some regulations are sector-specific. Industries such as finance, healthcare, and critical infrastructure often have their own compliance requirements. For example, banks may face strict reporting mandates around suspicious activity, while hospitals must comply with health privacy rules. International laws and treaties can also affect compliance posture, especially for global organizations operating across multiple jurisdictions. Civil and criminal liability are additional concerns. Mishandling sensitive data may result not only in corporate penalties but also in personal liability for executives or administrators. While security and compliance often work together, it is important to understand the distinction between them. Compliance is focused on meeting specific legal and regulatory obligations. These obligations are typically documented, time-bound, and binary, either met or not met. Security, on the other hand, is broader in scope and involves continuous risk management beyond defined checklists. A compliance system is not necessarily a secure one. Security leaders must go beyond minimum requirements to identify and address evolving threats. Over-reliance on compliance frameworks can lead to a false sense of security. For example, an organization may meet all regulatory obligations on paper while still lacking real-time monitoring, adequate incident response, or proper configuration management. Compliance defines minimum acceptable behavior. Security, by contrast, aims to ensure optimal protection. CISM professionals must recognize this gap and design programs that are both compliant and resilient. Simply put, compliance is necessary, but it is not sufficient on its own to guarantee safety. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other podcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Security leaders must also become familiar with the most common regulatory frameworks they may encounter. The General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, is a far-reaching privacy law that governs the collection, use, and storage of personal data for individuals in the European Union. HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, applies in the United States and protects sensitive patient data. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act, or SOX, impacts public companies and focuses on the accuracy and integrity of financial reporting, which includes aspects of IT controls and audit trails. Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, or PCI DSS, is another major framework. It applies to any organization that processes credit card transactions and requires controls around access, encryption, monitoring, and segmentation. In addition to these well-known frameworks, organizations must also comply with national and regional cybersecurity acts. Examples include the California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA, and the Network and Information Security Directive in the European Union, also known as NIS2. Understanding these frameworks is essential for security leaders involved in compliance program development or audit response. Legal obligations for handling and protecting data are often more detailed than they appear. Regulations typically define rules around how data is collected, how consent is obtained, and how long data can be retained. They may also include strict requirements around data minimization and purpose limitation. For organizations that operate internationally, cross-border data transfer regulations introduce an additional layer of complexity. Some jurisdictions prohibit or tightly control the movement of personal data outside national borders unless certain safeguards are in place. Data breach notification laws are also increasingly common. These laws require organizations to report breaches to regulators and, in some cases, notify affected individuals within defined timeframes, sometimes as short as 72 hours. Mandates may also require specific security measures to be in place, such as encryption, role-based access control, and audit logging. If third parties handle sensitive data on behalf of the organization, those third parties must also comply with legal standards. Ensuring that vendors and suppliers follow the same level of protection is a shared responsibility that falls on security leaders. A successful compliance program includes several critical components. First, organizations must maintain a comprehensive inventory of the laws, regulations, and standards that apply to them. This inventory should be reviewed and updated regularly, especially as business operations expand or shift into new markets. Roles and responsibilities for compliance oversight must be clearly defined. Everyone, from executives to line employees, needs to understand their part in maintaining compliance. Internal policies should be mapped to external requirements so that you can easily demonstrate how each obligation is being met. Continuous monitoring is also necessary. This includes tracking control performance, conducting regular policy reviews, and staying updated on regulatory changes. A good compliance program will also document all relevant activities and maintain audit readiness at all times. This means having evidence of control performance, decision-making processes, and corrective actions available for inspection. Documentation is not a formality. It is part of how organizations prove due diligence and protect themselves in the event of an audit or investigation. Identifying compliance risk is a proactive process. It begins with comparing current policies and practices against the latest legal expectations. Where gaps exist, security leaders must evaluate the organization's exposure. Jurisdiction, data type, and business model all play a role in determining risk. For example, a company that stores large volumes of personal health information may face stricter penalties than one that processes only anonymized data. Once risks are identified, they must be prioritized based on likelihood and impact. Linking compliance gaps to the broader enterprise risk register is a best practice. This ensures that regulatory risks are not siloed but instead integrated into business-level discussions. Audits and assessments can also be used to surface compliance vulnerabilities. These reviews help measure the maturity of controls, identify inconsistencies, and benchmark performance. Security leaders who understand compliance risk can better allocate resources and develop remediation plans that address both legal and operational priorities. Internal communication about compliance must be clear, accurate, and actionable. Legal language is often complex, but employees need to understand what is required of them in plain terms. Security professionals must work with legal teams to translate regulatory clauses into practical policies. Training programs should explain not just what the rules are, but why they matter and what consequences exist for non-compliance. Compliance awareness campaigns can reinforce expectations and build a culture where regulations are understood and respected. Collaborating with human resources and legal departments is also vital. These teams can help deliver consistent messaging and manage enforcement when violations occur. All employees should know where to access compliance documentation, and that information must be kept up to date. A centralized resource portal can simplify training, reporting, and internal audits. Clarity and accessibility are essential for maintaining alignment across departments and functions. Monitoring and reporting compliance status is an ongoing effort. Security leaders must define key performance indicators that reflect control effectiveness, audit readiness, and overall compliance health. These metrics help identify trends, uncover weaknesses, and demonstrate progress. Periodic internal audits or readiness assessments ensure that controls are functioning as intended and that documentation is up to date. These reviews may also include simulation of external audits to test team readiness under pressure. Status reports should be delivered to executive leadership or compliance committees on a regular basis. These updates should include current posture, known issues, and planned remediation activities. Traceability is another critical element. Every control should map to a specific regulatory clause, creating a clear line between obligation and execution. This traceability is often required by auditors and regulators. Organizations must also retain evidence of compliance, including training records, audit logs, and risk assessments, to show that due diligence has been applied consistently. Finally, compliance must be integrated into the overall security governance framework. It should not exist in a silo or be treated as an afterthought. Compliance initiatives must align with the organization's security strategy and business objectives. Legal and regulatory reviews should be embedded in all change management processes, especially when launching new systems or expanding into new regions. Vendor selection and third-party risk assessments must include detailed compliance checks to ensure partners meet the same standards as internal teams. Treat compliance as a continuous life cycle, not a one-time event. This includes ongoing monitoring, regular updates to policies, and periodic training. Accountability must also be assigned. Every compliance obligation should have a clear owner who is responsible for execution, monitoring, and reporting. This clarity ensures nothing is overlooked and that progress can be tracked. For CISM candidates, the ability to manage compliance across all domains of security governance is essential to building a mature, trustworthy, and legally sound security program. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bare Metal Cyber CISM Prepcast. For more episodes, tools, and study support, visit us at baremetalcyber.com.